Good afternoon. My name is Tanja Burgard. I am a junior researcher at the Department of Research Synthesis at the Leibniz Institute for Psychology in Trier. We are currently working on a meta-analysis on response rates in psychological online surveys, and I will present a few tentative results in the next few minutes. Response rates have declined in the last 20 to 30 years in household surveys in social and political sciences, as well as in surveys in counseling and psychology. Possible reasons of the decline in response rates may be over-surveying due to the growing number of surveys conducted, or scarcity of attention because of a total increase in communication requests in general. Non-response is typically systematic. That means that the final respondents are not representative for the target population. Therefore, non-response can bias results from empirical research. Especially online surveys are thought to suffer from non-response and less representative samples. Nevertheless, online surveys have become more popular in recent years in psychology and other fields due to their fast implementation and low costs. Thus, the quality of results from online surveys is in question, and our research questions are: does the trend of declining response rates hold for psychological online surveys? We will examine the overall time effect on response rates. And what effects do study design characteristics have on response rates? Thus, we also consider the effects of study design characteristics such as the use of incentives and contact protocols. In our previous meta-analysis, we have found a mean response rate of 43%, which was lower in more recent years and in case of longer questionnaires. Yet, our target population was limited to adults with depression or anxiety disorders. This led to a lack of generalizability and maybe caused the comparably high mean response rate. Due to a small number of studies included, sufficient information on potentially relevant moderator variables as the use of incentives was not available. To close the gaps of the first meta-analysis, we are aiming now to build a broader database with less restrictions on the population of interest. This will provide a greater generalizability of the results and also enable further moderator analysis and deeper examination of subgroups. The results of the meta-analysis will be published on the platform PsycOpenKarma, which is presented in more detail in the poster session. It is a website where meta-analytic datasets are openly accessible and can be augmented and curated collaboratively. Basic analysis can be reproduced with the help of a user-friendly interface, and meta-analytic evidence becomes interoperable and usable. In the current meta-analysis, our main hypothesis is that response rates in psychological surveys have decreased in recent years, as in other disciplines too. Moreover, costs and benefits of participation should influence the willingness to participate in an online survey. Therefore, we assume incentives to increase response rates and more burdensome, that means longer surveys, to decrease response rates. Contact protocols have also been found to have an effect on response rates. We hypothesize that more personal forms of contact, as telephone, mail, or personal approach, should yield higher response rates than email invitations. The use of a pre-notification before the actual invitation is also assumed to increase the willingness to participate in an online survey. Eligible studies had to be targeted to individuals only, not to organizations. The intervention of interest is the explicit invitation to an online survey. That means that studies announced on a web page via newsletters or newspapers without information on the exact number of invited persons were not relevant. The main outcome of the meta-analysis is the response rate. Either the response rate itself or sufficient information to calculate it, for example in a participant flow, is therefore necessary. Later waves of panel studies were also excluded, as we did not want to mix initial response with later panel mortality. As we concentrate on online surveys only, studies reporting on other survey types and not explicitly reporting on an online survey subgroup were excluded from this meta-analysis. We searched for online surveys reporting on response rates in PsycInfo and PubPsych to focus on psychological surveys, which resulted in 931 hits. Next to the abstract screened and found to be eligible, studies from 2 previous meta-analyses were considered, namely our previous meta-analysis mentioned before and the meta-analysis from Dykela, Bosniak, and Klosam and Freda from 2019. All in all, 813 full texts had to be assessed for eligibility. Up to now, we have screened 638 full texts with 406 fulfilling the eligibility criteria. 281 reports have been coded and used in the following analyses. As some records report on different samples, for example if one group is incentivized and the other not, in total there are 368 response rates available for the meta-analysis. The main outcome of the meta-analysis is the initial response rate, defined as the share of usable surveys from all potential respondents contacted. Relevant moderators that might have an impact on the response rate are coded on 3 levels: general information from the report, relevant characteristics of the treatment, which is the invitation to the survey, and information on the sample. The grouped forest plots enable comparisons of meta-analytic mean response rates between subgroups defined by study characteristics. On the left-hand side, studies are compared based on the use of email invitations versus other contact modes and on whether personal address is used in the invitation or not. Independent of the kind of contact mode, personal address in the invitation yields higher mean response rates. Moreover, the use of email as initial contact is associated with slightly lower mean response rates. The recommendation concerning the initial contact with the respondent would therefore be to use a non-electronic contact mode with a personal address to the respondent, for example, Dear Mr. White. The grouped forests on the right-hand side suggest that the use of incentives pays off, at least if pre-notification is used. Using a pre-notification before the actual survey invitation has no clear effect on response rates. However, the highest mean response rate is observed for the studies using pre-notification and incentives, yet the evidence base for this subgroup is the smallest one with 25 effect sizes. The funnel plot shows that the mean response rate in the dataset is about 40%. Studies without personal address are more frequent in the lower half of the distribution. There is a positive relationship between response rates and the corresponding standard errors, resulting in a highly significant Agus test. In this case, this might not be due to publication bias, but it would be plausible that there is a substantial reason. Higher standard errors are found in smaller studies. In these studies, respondents might be approached more personally, resulting in higher response rates. In this meta-analysis, a 3-level model is used for the meta-regressions, with 368 samples nested in 281 reports. There is considerable variance as well between the samples as between the reports. And there is considerable heterogeneity between the reports. That means that the total variance is greater than expected by chance alone. In the following, we will try to explain this heterogeneity by using potentially relevant study characteristics as moderator variables. The grouped scatter plots provide a first idea of possible relationships in the data. There is a slight decrease in response rates for email, mail, and personal or phone invitations over time, but really striking are the clearly higher response rates for personal or phone contacts. On the right-hand side, in studies using incentives, the mean response rates are higher. The number of invitations, that means the amount of potential respondents contacted for a study, is negatively associated with the response rate. There are no interaction effects. That means this association is the same in studies with and without incentives. We tested the initial hypotheses with multi-level mixed effects models. We computed one model for the 2 hypotheses on costs and benefits, indicating a positive effect of incentives and a negative effect of longer questionnaires, as expected. The intercept of 38.6% is the estimated response rate in a hypothetical study with no incentive use and the mean number of items in the questionnaire. The coefficient for incentives tells us that an almost 10% higher response rate is predicted if incentives are used compared to not using incentives. In the second model, the assumed effects of contact protocols were tested. The intercept of 45% is the predicted response rate in a study using an invitation mode other than email and no pre-notification. As expected, email invitations yield about 6% lower response rates than other contact modes. An effect of the use of a pre-notification cannot be detected. Finally, all variables are tested in the full model, including the publication year, the costs and benefits, as well as the contact protocol. Again, the effects of incentives and survey length can be found. As expected, publication year is negatively related with response rates. Email invitations yield lower response rates, and pre-notifications improve participation. However, for these effects there is no clear evidence found. All in all, about 10% of the variance in response rates is explained with the 5 moderators tested. To sum up, we found a mean response rate of 40% for psychological online surveys. Response rates were higher if incentives were used and lower for surveys with more items. Moreover, the explorative analyses as well as the meta-regression suggested that the kind of invitation plays a role to motivate potential respondents. More personal forms of contact, as telephone or personal contact, are better than email invitations. Moreover, the respondents should be personally addressed by name in the invitation. After this presentation, the coding has to be finished and reliabilities between the 3 coders have to be assessed in detail. Then the analysis will be finalized. Next to the meta-regressions presented here, substantial differences between the previous meta-analyses and the updated data will also be of interest. Finally, the complete dataset will be made accessible on PsycOpen Karma. This is a platform for meta-analytic data and analyses in psychology, hosted by ZPIT and publicly available in 2021. Meta-analysis can be reproduced and even be modified, for example, by varying the moderators used. The datasets are interoperable to make basic analyses as meta-regression, forest plot, and power analyses easily available on a graphical user interface for various datasets. Therefore, information from previous meta-analysis can be reused for updating evidence. For example, in the meta-analyses of Dijkela, Bosniak, and Kloser-Manfreda from 2019, response rates of web surveys are compared to other survey modes. The codings for the web modes are available with relevant study characteristics as incentives, reminders, or the contact mode. To make use of these codings, the studies in this meta-analysis were screened for eligibility, and eligible web samples were merged with the data coded for this meta-analysis. Hence, the database can be used and augmented with the present meta-analysis, and after publication in PsycOpen Karma can be fully reproduced and will be hopefully further augmented by new evidence.